Hey guys, all right, so I want to give you the second video in my series on the forms that you're going to encounter when you're selling your property. So this is the disclosure form. Typically, right after you sign the video or the document that I reviewed in the first video, the listing agreement, one of the next documents you're going to get to review and fill out and sign is going to be the disclosure. So this is basically a document in which you disclose anything that you know to be wrong with the property or any concerns or just facts in general about the property. So you have an obligation as the seller of the property to, for example, if there's something wrong with the property, you need to disclose it. If it comes up later in an inspection and the buyer turns out to be able to prove that you were trying to hide some material defect, that could be, legally challenging for you in the future. So you'll get some sort of similar form. This is the one that we use at Coldwell Banker Realty in Southeast Florida. The form that you see should be pretty similar to this. So let's just jump into this, try to go through this quickly. Seller name and address. Um, do you reside? Yes or no? That's pretty straightforward. If not, when's the last time you were there? Is it leased? Anything basically related to the land that the buyer needs to be aware of. So, for example, drainage or flood problems. So, if you know that there's a bad drainage tile in your yard and you say no here, that's probably not a good idea. Um, in a lot of these cases, you have the option for unknown, which I prefer that one because a lot of these things are in some ways subjective. And I wouldn't want you to say, no, there's no issue in your opinion, when in the future, maybe a buyer could say, no, this is definitely an issue. So, for example, is there any drainage or flood problems here? If there's nothing significant that you're aware of, rather than saying no, it's probably best to say unknown, because if it turns out there actually is a busted pipe in the yard and you just didn't realize it, you don't want to have stated no, there's no problems, and then something comes up. So unknown, I don't know about any drainage problems. I would go with that. If you do answer yes to any of these options, you should explain what the issue is, briefly here. So this is very important. Deed restrictions or boundaries, any legal encumbrances or restrictions about how the property can be used. This is typically something that you will have been made aware of when you bought the property. If there's anything in particular about, a neighbor's fence is actually 4 feet over the property line or something like that, disclose and detail that here. In most cases, if you are not aware of anything, then unknown is going to be a good choice for this section. Um, you know, of Unless you're sure about something, you probably don't want to say no. There's definitely no issue here. I would rather say it's unknown, unlikely, but we're not aware. Again, structure of the house, of the property. Um, Again, unknown in most cases. Um, for example, some of these questions, I'm not really sure how the expectation exists that you as a seller will definitively answer yes or no. Um, are there or now or have there been in the past any structural cracks or flaws in the walls, floors, or foundations? Well, hopefully not, but I mean, unless you've inspected it or unless you are a contractor and you know what you're, looking for, you probably aren't going to know. So it's unknown unless you actually know that there is in fact a problem. If you know about something, you need to disclose it. Um, Additions or remodels, this is important. If you've done any work to the house or had any work done to the house since you bought it, I hope that you had it permitted properly and you had all the paperwork with the local municipality in place. You need to disclose that. If you decided to build a deck on your own or something, or a shed, and you didn't permit it, disclose that. Definitely disclose that. Don't try to get it slipped through, because it's possible or probable even that the buyer will do some sort of a survey and figure out that there's a unpermitted modification to the property, which could compromise the entire deal down the line. So avoid that. Electrical, again, any problem with the electrical? In most cases, your best answer is going to be unknown, unless, for example, in my own property, I know that there's one of my electrical panels that is old, and I've had an electrician here, and he's told me about it. It's it's something I know about, I would disclose it. I would say, hey, look, this is a potential issue. But in most cases, unless you know about something, unknown is the answer you want to go with. The HVAC system, same types of questions. Appliances, any problem with the appliances? If your dishwasher isn't getting hot and you know it's not working, you should disclose that. But if they all seem to be working as far as you can tell, I mean, in this one, it's all, whether or not the appliances are working is pretty objective. You probably are fine to say, yes, or no, rather that no, there's no known issues here. But you know, again, not to your unknown can be interpreted as not to your knowledge, and so think about it that way. Again, I probably here would go with not to my knowledge. Again, plumbing, any issues with the plumbing system, some details about the plumbing system, um, roof, approximate age of roof. This is important. Don't if the roof is 15 years old, but you redid one corner because it was leaking last year, don't put 1 year for age of roof. Be accurate because there'll be an inspection, and if you try to cut corners here, the inspector is going to identify that there's a lot of age on the roof, or there's some structural problems with the roof, perhaps, and that's going to be problematic for you later on. So. Disclose the approximate age as best as you know, and if you have had any damage repaired, disclose it. In many cases, if you haven't done any work since you bought it and you don't know of any leaks, it seems to be fine to you. Go with unknown. You don't want to say, no, there's no problems, and then it turns out, well, there actually is a leak that they find on inspection that can throw the deal out. So same with termites. This is all very similar with just different aspects of the property. But seawalls come up a lot. This is a very important one. You're going to get this question: has the seawall been repaired? If so, when was it repaired? What's the status of the seawall? So just be prepared to get those kinds of questions. Disclose here, up front, and be honest about it to avoid any potential problems later. Mold, okay, lead-based paint. Let's talk about this briefly. You're actually going to see separate disclosures specifically for lead-based paint if the property was built before 1978. This is just a government requirement due to the prevalence of lead-based paint in the past. This is really not common now. You're not going to come across this very often. Maybe in really old properties that have been maintained for historic purposes. But generally, lead-based paint isn't a common issue. Go with unknown here, because if your house was built before 78, it probably doesn't have any exposed lead-based paint left. But, you never know. Not to my knowledge. That's what I would go with. Pools, hot tubs, are they all wired correctly, connected correctly? Everything's working with the swimming pool, the pumps, the filters, and all that. Any issues? Not to my knowledge. If you're aware of them, disclose them. And the homeowners association, is it an HOA? And does the HOA currently have any legal actions? Special assessments you may want to mention here as well. If it's just business as usual and there's no unusual issues that you're aware of, none known or unknown. So this one is, unless you're involved in your local neighborhood on, the city council meetings or pay close attention to that kind of stuff, it's mostly going to be, no, or if you have the option, unknown is probably your best chance, your best response here, because the question is, are you aware of anything that the neighborhood's going to do that's going to impact the value or desirability of the property? By definition, desirability is subjective. So, to say, no, the neighborhood's not going to do anything. Well, if it turns out that they plant some trees across the street in a swale, in 3 months after the property sold, then, that, I don't know if that would create problems, probably not. But nevertheless, just understand that that's something that you're going to be asked about. FIRPTA, Foreign Investment and Real Property Tax Act. Ask your realtor about this. If you are a foreign person, you will have to deal with this. I'm not going to get into it now. It's not really a common issue unless you are, in fact, a foreign citizen and you are closing agent, and the realtor will help you with that. Legal actions against the property. Are you in conflict with your neighbor about the fence? Or are they threatening to, sue you because you're not removing the encroachment? That kind of thing. You need to disclose. Um, Homeowners insurance policy. I live in South Florida. I've made a claim against homeowners insurance here due to hurricanes. You should disclose that, mention it in detail. It's not uncommon. It's not going to be a problem, as long as you can show records of why the claim was made and what the repairs were, and that everything is fine now. Um, Warranty. If there's warranty on any sort of appliances, home warranties, I know we will get into these in another video perhaps, but if there is one in place, in some cases, you can transfer it to the new buyer. And in fact, if you've recently bought a home and you're going to resell it and you have a home warranty, that can be somewhat of an incentive for the buyer. So just check out your paperwork on your policy. Probably in most cases, it's not transferable, but just if you have one, call the company and ask. And that's about it as far as the seller's real property disclosure forms go. You'll get something very similar to this, and depending on the type of property. For example, if you're selling a condo, there's a form specific for condos, and there's some differences in rules about the building and how things need to be reported. But it's the same concept. You disclose what you know about the property to the best of your knowledge, and that's the point of this form. So this is the second form in the home selling form series that we're working on, and I will see you guys in the next video.